So I think it's quite clear to everyone that we are learning, we're getting into something extremely deep, but it's incumbent upon us to make our way through that depth. One thing when in depth is you cannot discern what's in depth standing outside of it. In order to discern what's in the depth, you have to actually get in there. And the depth that we are talking about is a very important principle, which is that by the Father Hashem created the world, and we, so to speak, function on the worldly level. The reality of the world's existence and our function in the world is not a worldly type of function. We're not functioning, acting in the world for the sake of the world. The world is within the godly reality. This is what gives it a presence. So it is the godly reality that gives a presence to the world and gives the world a sense of reality, of His presence. The simple mashal for this that we've used in the past, and we'll repeat it because it's germane to what we're discussing, that when you hold something up, you're holding up the cup. If somebody observes you're holding up the cup, his chochmah, his wisdom will tell him that when he's observing, he's not observing a cup, he's observing a cup being held up by a person. And what's the significance of that? That he's observing what the cup is being held up for. What is the point of this? He's not observing a cup. He's observing a human action. And that's what he relates to. What am I looking at? What is this action about? This is a metaphor for understanding our world. World is a divine creation. It's a divine creation not outside of the divine domain. There's no such thing as outside of the divine domain. We said it yesterday. It exists within the divine domain. And therefore when we are observing it, the divine action of creating a world and showing it to us. And it is from that perspective and within that reality that we learn Chassidus, we try to understand what's going on. And this, what we're learning right now, demands that we climb right in there and speak of the reality the way it is within the divine domain, not as we observe it from outside. Because observing from outside, it would lose all its meaning. I want to start from the end of the second line, from the bottom. On page Kuf Yud, there's a top section. It ends a certain section. I want to start on 2 lines from the end of that top section. At the end of that line, it says V'zehu. The line begins, "B'mehamidas ha'elyenos nimtza yisparus ha'elokim." Okay, we're not going there back. B'zehu. And thus, this is the significance and the meaning when we say, "Shechochmah binah hey mitzerech ha'elames," and chochmah and binah are for the sake of world. Hagam, in brief parentheses, Hagam, although Sheshayochim, that they're applicable, chochmah binah applicable, Gamim lehoy ha'elames, even if there were no worlds, as we discussed for a long time, that chochmah and binah are valid within the reality where they exist to begin with. They don't have to spread outside. Like a person can apply his own chochmah to himself. He does not need the recipient to study, to think for himself. Chochmah. Midos are dependent on the recipient. But wisdom, chochmah and binah are not dependent on the recipient. And this, the same thing is l'mayla. That chochmah and binah are shayochim. Shayochim means applicable, even if there were no worlds. Nonetheless, the Pada says that chochmah and binah is also for the sake of world. And what does it mean for the sake of world? Chochmah and binah are shayochim, are applicable even if there were no world. The answer is, they are for the sake of world. They have a tremendous effect on the presence of the world, which is bikdei, in order sheyiye yidiya v'asoga lekis bo'elomis. It is in order to effectuate, to bring about that there should be a knowledge, not only a knowledge, but a hasoga lekis, but actually a comprehension, a divine comprehension within world. You should be able to comprehend godliness within world. This is why there's chochmah binah. If the world were created just by midos, then the godly element in the world will be completely obscured. You would see exclusively world. The chochmah and binah participating in the creation of the world brings into the world a godly element. So that within the worldly context, it is possible to know and to massing and comprehend the Logos. Ukmation is by liyil perikbo. This is where it was discussed much earlier. The principle that there is a knowledge and a comprehension of Elokus in world, which is the result of the participation of chochmah binah in the very creation of the world. Going back to our moshel, do I have you with me? I'm going to go back to this moshel of holding up the cup. If the holding up of the cup were exclusively a hand action, then you would see a cup being held up. And going back to the cup, you would see a cup, as we say, a cup floating in the air, which is insignificant. But because there is a participation of chochmah binah, because you recognize that this holding up of the cup is not just a hand holding up, but there is an intelligence behind this holding up. Therefore, what you see in the holding up is a completely different thing. You see a human intent in this holding up. This is similar to what we're saying. There will be a godly presence in the creation of the world. This is due to the chochmah binah participating in the creation of the world. I'd like to hear Am I making myself clear? Do you get the point?
Usually it is midas that are the communicators. They're the ones that are...
Yeah, but midas communicate only world.
What's that mean? I mean, up until now we've had re-established time after time that midas are the ones that are expressive, seichel is unto itself.
Right.
In this context we're saying, if the world was made by his midas, we wouldn't sense him. But it did seem like up until now, midas were the edge that touches another person. They were for the zulas, they were for others.
Yeah, and what do the others have? Get from this?
The sense of the speaker.
No, the sense what they get. You give somebody lunch, what does he have? Lunch. He gets what he needs.
You give somebody the thought of lunch, you don't even have lunch.
Excuse me?
You give somebody just a thought of kindness or lunch, they don't even have that. The seichel doesn't even
Fine. There's no question that it has to come through midas to create the entity.
Right. So now,
but then, as a result of the participation of chochmah binah, he gets the Creator himself in him, with him. In other words, he is not just an entity in the world, but there is significance to his presence.
But by human beings, it's the speech and action, the speech and midas that make for interaction, that make for understanding each other. We don't understand each other's thoughts without that level of speech and action, midas driving all of that.
Let's stop there for a second. I invite you to join me for lunch. And I'm giving you a lunch. And I'm giving you a comfortable seat to enjoy your lunch. And I sit with you. And we, so to speak, join for lunch, and we relate to each other. Of this entire scenario, what is the most important, what is the core of what's happening? When you walk away from this encounter, what do you take with you?
The relationship.
The relationship. The intangible.
But if there was no invitation and no meal, so they're both necessary, no?
That's right, because you have to have a recipient. That's what midas come in. But the midas themselves would create a world of no significance.
If midas were by themselves, so if they were completely stripped of any...
There is no participation purpose of the giver.
If that were the case...
That is the case by midas.
Why do you say that? The human midas are continuously imbued with seichel.
Oh, seichel! This is what I'm saying. So because of seichel participation, this is why it transmits, it connects you to each other. Not by midas.
Okay, so here talking about the world, we're stressing the point that within the whole midas of world, show of what the world is, inside that comes along his seichel, yeah?
Chochmah binah, right. As a result of that, there is understanding and knowledge of godliness in the world, which is really a phenomenal statement. World and godliness are not eons apart, they're completely different realities. Shall I go on? Just one more sentence.
Well, just on that point, how do we see understanding of God within world? They're eons apart, but yet what? I can look at a flower.
But you recognize in the world a divine presence.
Like we talked about looking at the sky or the man's ownership or any of these things.
That's
yes?
right.
Okay.
The Rambam begins his sefer speaking about human behavior. And what does it start with? The first principle is to know that there is a first being, First being is the antithesis of world.
Well, that's why I always think of it as a super layer that's lying on top of world. It's supernatural. It's not world per se.
And that's the whole point, that this supernatural participates in the creation of the world. And as a result of this participation, the world itself is elevated to be conscious and recognize the Creator in the world. Just as, in our example, as simple as it may be, when you sit and you eat lunch, you're both busy eating, and you talk about the weather. What do you go away with? Having sat together. I mentioned it little the posuk. Hayechu shnayim yachdo bilti im neyod. Would two people be working together if not for the rendezvous between them? Rendezvous means an agreement to meet. Ultimately, they're just working together. They're not even discussing mutual interests. They're just strolling together. And this working together has such profound significance to them that it represents their togetherness. Much greater than any of the interaction between them. Much greater. This is what we have to bring to the forefront in our mind when you understand these things. Yes, God created the world, and we are functioning within the world. But the godly presence, and the knowledge of the godly presence, and the comprehension of the godliness within the world has been granted to us along with being created. Because the godly wisdom and intelligence, chochmah, binah, the moichin, are also participants in the creation in a much superior manner, but it's there. The physical creation is for the midas. But it does not completely obscure the divine presence in the creation, in the Creator.
Can I ask something?
Yes, sir.
When we talk about the chochmah binah, means Hashem's chochmah binah?
Yes. Chochmah binah, as we're going to say, and we said already, the chochmah binah, the atzilus. Atzilus is the means by which Hashem's chochmah binah is transmitted to the world. And talking about atzilus. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, and because there's chochmah binah from Hashem, our chochmah binah can pick it up?
Yes, because our chochmah binah notices the chochmah binah that Hashem in Hashem's participation in the world. Just as, please, this is the moshel. When I'm holding up this cup, can you see it?
Yeah.
You see my hand holding up the cup. You don't see my intent. But with your chochmah binah, you see my intent.
You said the physical world is made with midas.
Right.
And even there, those midas must be imbued with seichel, yeah?
Yes.
And it's on that basis that we say stuff like pink or green is teferis, and
so I'm saying, excuse me. Pardon me. There are two, the multi layers in this. When you prepare lunch, the Gemara says, Odom maybe chitim min soda. A person brings wheat from the field. Chitim koises, is that what he eats? Does he eat wheat? The wheat gets ground and cleared, and then it gets kneaded into dough, and then it's baked, and you eat something not completely, you can't even trace it back to the wheat. All that it goes is put into the wheat so that it becomes edible. His representation comes by the wisdom of the baker, knowing how to present this plain wheat. He's eating wheat. Basically, he's eating wheat. But he's eating koise. Is that what he's eating? He's eating that which the wisdom of the person had transformed from the wheat. And therefore, when he takes a piece of bread or any food that is edible, what does he relate to? To the wisdom of the cook, not to the wheat shorn from the ground.
I'm kind of asking it maybe in the opposite direction, that things as they are unto themselves, the physical world per se is made from his midas, and I guess at certain points we say we can kind of see him in it almost.
Because the midas themselves have an element of wisdom.
Okay.
That's what we say.
Right. But right, and the main communication, or the main spirit, comes through him putting his seichel into.
Exactly, the wisdom.
Okay.
This is the phenomenal thing that the Pardes makes a point of, and the Rebbe elaborates and shows us. This is look at this. Let's continue on in the second section on page Kuf Yud. Of course, of our Pardes Shom Buzelisheni. The Pardes writes as follows: Ki kedem his pastos hamidos. Again, the introduction and the preamble that we started today's year is very important to bear in mind. That we are actually, when we learn these things, we are actually inside the divine domain. We're not outside. And it's from that vantage point, from that reality, that we can go further and identify and speak about how things are in that level, in that reality. Pardon me. Did you make Birchat HaTorah? Birchat HaTorah, I see you. Birchat HaTorah.
Birchat HaTorah?
Yeah.
You want me to turn to that?
No, but not if you made it.
Oh. No, I didn't.
Please, you can't learn Torah before you make Birchat HaTorah.
Okay. I said it.
You said it, okay. Good. The course of a Pardes Shom is Elisheni. The Pardes writes as follows. In this line, the importance of how we introduce the whole thing. Ki koidem hispashos hamidas. That before the midas came forth, he spread forth. Hoyo mischakim ba'atzmus. He, Hashem, was mischakim, was identifying wisdom ba'atzmus within himself. Within himself and of his, to understand himself, his own wisdom, reality. The chochmah soy, and his chochmah, Behasogas atzmusoi. In comprehending himself. Imagine this kind of words. Hashem was mischakim, was delving in with his chochmah in bringing forth on chochmah level his own reality. To translate his own reality on his chochmah level. Ki hu v'chochmosei hakeil etzem echad. Ad kan l'shem. Because he and his chochmah, this is all a quote from the Pardes, hakeil etzem echad is all one essence. The chochmah is not distinct of himself. Ad kan l'shem. End of quote. Now the Rebbe comes in and elaborates. V'nire hakavono, v'nire, and therefore, it would make sense. It appears that hakavono, the intent of what the Pardes is pointing to, hakavono al chochmah ubina. He's talking about chochmah binah hakluli bein soy baru. The chochmah binah that are incorporated, included, and part of ein soy baru. This is not chochmah binah that protrude forth outside. This is an internal chochmah binah participating within Ein Sof Baruch Hu, within the reality, the divine reality itself. V'yesh loymar. It can further be added, so to speak, for clarity purposes. Dehu inyan idiyas atzma. That this is the principle of idiyas atzma, of knowing himself. Meisha Kosu begins HaKedush. And as he writes in the Geras HaKedush, the bidiyas atzma yideyas HaTorah. That by knowing himself, he knows the Torah. Because the Torah is rooted and is the revelation of his own truth. Bidiyas atzma, he knows the Torah. He brings forth the knowledge of himself to himself. And further on, the Rebbe is going to explain as a question, if this is knowing himself, so what's the point of knowing it? He is himself. But this is in the next stage. I'm very anxious to go further, but we can't, right? Okay. All right, but as I said, the introduction is important. At least now we know where we are. So have a great day. I hope it meets Hashem. Just want to say this. I hope it meets Hashem that I'll be in class tomorrow morning. But there's a good possibility that I won't make it tomorrow morning. Because my family, the children and the whole family got together from all over the country to participate in celebrating my having reached this milestone. And therefore it's going to be, chances are it's going to be a late night. But maybe not.